Sony just made one of the biggest changes in PlayStation's history. From January 2028, they'll stop producing physical discs for new PlayStation games. You'll still be able to buy new games digitally, including through retailers. Sony isn't shutting that down entirely. What disappears is the disc itself, and everything that came with it. Resale, lending, and permanent ownership that doesn't depend on a server or an account staying active. Existing discs will keep working as before. But here's the part that matters more than the headline. Digital sales already dominate by Sony's own numbers, and yet most PS5 owners still chose a console that plays discs anyway, paying more for the privilege. That gap is the real story here, and we'll get into exactly why it matters. Sony's decision may have less to do with where customers are genuinely heading, and more to do with who controls every single transaction once physical stops existing as an option at all. Sony's own words. As consumer preferences and the broader entertainment industry continue to shift away from physical discs to digital, physical game disc production for all new games releasing on PlayStation consoles will be discontinued starting January 2028. It's a first in PlayStation history, and it raises an obvious follow-up. Will the PS6 even ship with a disc drive? Or will Sony offer one as an optional external accessory? Sony hasn't confirmed either way. The backlash was immediate and intense. "You will own nothing." 122,000 likes on that single reply alone, which tells you something about how the announcement actually landed with the people it affects most. The hashtag #NotBuyingPS6 spread fast across social media within hours. Retailers, who stand to lose a real slice of their business overnight, weren't happy either. Some publicly discussed the impact on their stores. What makes it sting more is that Sony once mocked Xbox for floating this exact idea 13 years ago in an ad featuring Shuhei Yoshida, former president of Sony Worldwide Studios. That old ad is getting far more attention now than Sony probably wants. Yoshida was later pushed out after clashing with PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan. In his own words, "He asked me to do some ridiculous things and I said no." That detail matters because this isn't just fan anger. People who actually built the platform are uneasy too. Hideo Kojima, one of the most respected directors in gaming, made the sharper point. Physical games download to your own hardware, so the data is genuinely yours, sitting on your machine. Shift everything to streaming, and you're renting access from a company that can revoke it whenever it decides to. So is Sony just wrong? Or is physical media actually dying the way they claim? Sony's own financial report says 78% of games sold across 2025 were digital, climbing to 85% in Q4 specifically. That's a real documented number, but it blends together hundreds of small PlayStation Store titles that were never going to get a physical release in the first place with the small handful of blockbusters that actually do. Only 7 games sold over 100,000 physical units all year, according to that same reporting. Even the big ones lean heavily digital. FC26 sold just 12% physical by Sony's own figures. Analyst estimates from Alinea Analytics, and it's worth being clear these are estimates, not Sony's official numbers, suggest a meaningful share of Resident Evil Requiem's player base logged under 10 hours, which the analyst reads as a sign that many physical copies were resold almost immediately rather than kept and played. Separately, UK industry data puts digital downloads at 89.5% of all games sold in that specific market, though that figure includes mobile apps, which skews it further. On the surface, that looks fairly conclusive, but here's Sony's own data working against its own argument. You can buy a PS5 with a disc drive or a cheaper digital-only model, and the PS5 Pro ships digital-only now with no disc option at all. Yet, 82% of all PS5s sold still have a disc drive, the more expensive option, chosen anyway, even though most actual software purchases on that same console end up being digital regardless. That's not really a contradiction once you actually think it through. Someone can buy 9 games digitally and still want the option of one discounted physical title, backward compatibility with their old library, or simply the freedom to lend and resell later on. Digital sales measure what people actually buy day to day. Console choice measures what people want to keep open as an option just in case. And that's precisely the gap Sony's decision closes for good, permanently. Which brings us to the actual incentive. Every physical copy that gets sold, loaned, or resold is a sale Sony and the publisher never get a cut of. Kill the disc, and that entire secondhand market disappears along with it, permanently. You won't even be able to sell a used console with games loaded onto it because purchases are tied to your account, not the hardware. That control extends further than most people realize. Sony has removed licensed content from the PlayStation Store before as agreements expired and has delisted individual titles from PlayStation Plus. Worth noting that losing a Plus subscription title is different from losing something you bought outright through the store. Under Sony's account terms, prolonged inactivity can also result in account closure, which is worth reading directly rather than taking on faith. These are the exact kinds of claims worth verifying yourself before you repeat them. Which discs, which regions, whether a decision was reversed, and whether closure is automatic or discretionary all matter here. This isn't hypothetical elsewhere in the industry. In 2024, Ubisoft delisted its always-online racing game The Crew, shut its servers down, and the game became permanently unplayable, even for people who'd paid full price and bought extras on top. Ubisoft's own statement: "We understand this may be disappointing for players still enjoying the game, but it has become a necessity due to upcoming server infrastructure and licensing constraints." Ubisoft's legal argument in the resulting lawsuit was that players never purchased unfettered ownership rights to begin with. It's part of why the Stop Killing Games movement has gained real momentum across the EU. Worth being precise here too. Even a physical disc doesn't always guarantee full independence anymore. Some modern releases ship as incomplete builds requiring huge day-one downloads, online activation, or ongoing server support. A complete, offline-capable disc still gives you far more independence than a license tied entirely to an account, but that nuance matters because it's what makes the argument harder to dismiss. There's a separate problem worth watching too. Physical prices float with supply and demand once a game hits the second-hand market. Digital prices don't. Sony sets them directly, including, potentially, different prices for different customers on the identical product. That's a thread we're going to follow in a separate video because what people have found there deserves its own full breakdown. If you want the deeper look at how gaming's business model actually works behind the marketing language, that's what this channel does. Subscribe if that's useful to you. The future of gaming is very likely mostly digital. That part of Sony's claim probably holds up, but convenience and ownership were never the same thing. Sony isn't just removing a disc from the shelf. It's removing the one version of a PlayStation game that can exist without Sony's continuing permission. Two things I couldn't independently verify and flagged instead of stating as fact. The exact executive share sale figures, I omitted them entirely rather than repeat a number that document said was misreported, and the specifics of the 500 movies removal and account inactivity closure claims. I pointed viewers to check the terms directly rather than asserting details I can't confirm. Before this airs, those are the two spots worth an actual source check.